Live from the 607, it's the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour, where we're talking everything movies, TV, comics, and entertainment. Join in the conversation on social media with the hashtag ODPH, because here we go. Welcome to a very special edition of Fanlight Zone Presents. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also the editor-in-chief here at Fanlight Zone. And to my left, your right at home, he is one of our executive producers here at Fanlight. And you know him from the comic book reviews every single Wednesday, dropping at 9 a.m. Please give a warm welcome to Rich.
That is right. We are here. We are about to talk about an exciting, very exciting book that is on Kickstarter, and I cannot wait to jump into it.
Absolutely, because if you grew up in the 90s and suffered through a lot of the stuff that was going on during the time, you might have missed this gem, because a dinosaur story that really stands out from the pack is something hard to find. But let alone its legacy still lasted for 30 years, because now it is finally returning via Lighthouse Comics on Kickstarter, and it is a project that is absolutely crushing it right now. And if you don't sign up for it and get it in your hands, you're truly missing out on something truly special that is standing out from everything else, whether at the shops or on your collection. And we are so excited to have some of the people behind it joining us on air to talk about it. One, you might know him as the co-creator of John Constantine, and you know him from his run of Saga Swamp Thing. And also, he's here with the head of Lighthouse Comics himself, who knows a little thing or two about Eisner Award-winning projects. So please give a warm welcome to Stephen R. Bissette and Chris Stevens. Guys, what is going on?
We're here with you, and thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Rich.
Oh, thank you for coming on. And with this story, a Tyrant, which, like I say, I remember this from the 90s, but to see the evolution of that book to come back now on Kickstarter form, Stephen, I'll start with you. How did this whole story come to be?
You mean the story of Tyrant or the story of this Kickstarter?
We'll go with Tyrant first, because I think if anybody's not familiar with it, they need to get familiar with it.
So, long story short, I'm a monster kid born in the mid-50s. I grew up loving dinosaurs, and I never outgrew that love. And I always ached for a dinosaur comic to exist that was not going to be cluttered with, you know, GIs fighting dinosaurs in World War II, or time travel machines, or Turok and Ander in the Lost Valley. Much as I loved all those comics, I just wanted to be able to read a comic book about dinosaurs, and not necessarily an educational comic. I wanted to be swept away into the life of a dinosaur. And by the mid-90s, nobody had been doing that as yet. So when Rick Veitch, Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons, John Tottleman, Don Simpson, Chester Brown, and I did the 1963 comic book series for Image Comics, I finally earned enough of a nest egg that I could dedicate 2 or 3 years to doing the one comic I had always dreamed of doing, which turned out to be Tyrant. It was originally planned to be a 15 to 20-year project. My goal was to present to the reader the birth, the life, and the death of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. My primary impetus was to make it as rooted in the actual paleontological science as possible. I can't use the word accurate, because, like all sciences, paleontology is always changing, always shifting. And the model that existed for reconstructed prehistoric life in the mid-90s when I was doing Tyrant, as any layperson recognizes, has changed dramatically in the ensuing 3 decades. That's just the nature of the beast, no pun intended. But I really did my best, and thanks to my longtime friendship with Dr. Michael Ryan, who at that time in the 90s was with the Royal Tyrrell Museum up in Alberta, Canada, I was able to access the paleontologists themselves, who were experts on the life forms I was hoping to bring to life. I really wanted to steep a reader in the life of these animals, you know, without anthropomorphizing them. This wasn't going to be the Land Before Time with fancy names and singing dinosaurs and so on. I really wanted to make it possible via the magic of comics for you to lose yourself in experiencing the life of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Unfortunately, the entire direct sale market imploded right around the time I was working on what would have been Tyrant number 5, and I had to pull the plug on the project. So I only got like 2.5 years into my plans for a 15-year project. But it made a lasting impression with a number of people. And a few years ago, Chris Stevens reached out to me, proposing that a collected edition be put together. And at the time I said no. Chris courted me over a number of years, and it really was Jim Rugg and the late Ed Piskor's Comics Kayfabe podcast that they did on Tyrant that prompted me to say yes the next time that Chris reached out to me.
That's awesome.
That's incredible.
It's an incredible, and of course, if people aren't familiar, they'll get familiar with the Kickstarter. And of course, if you go out and you check it out, there's some amazing artwork and everything actually involved in this. And it is really cool to have a project where, like you said, you didn't, you went with realistic dinosaurs instead of going after, the anamorphic kind of style and, what anybody would be used to in a comic book. And I think that it really shows, especially when hitting Kickstarter, because obviously Chris was right and with Lighthouse, because we have the great news of saying that after just on day one, you had over $150,000 in backing. So you've cleared, goal. It's getting higher, which is great because it obviously grab this collection. It's awesome. It's going to blow you away. It's beautiful. Everything looks great about it, which we're here to talk about. And so, first of all, congratulations on such the outpour, because that's not a normal thing. We were watching this thing when it went live, going, oh man, it's just kept going and going and going and going. And usually, there's a little bit of grace period. And so that has to feel amazing. First of all, how does it feel, knowing that there was such an outpour? And secondly, did you envision that this was going to happen, or is this to the next level that you weren't even anticipating?
I didn't, but Chris was telling me for a long time, this is how it would go. Chris, I'll turn over to you because you certainly had the vision to this.
Well, thanks, Steve. No, guys, I believe so strongly in the work that Steve did on Tyrant, and I'm the right age I read it right after high school, and it stuck with me. And Jim Rugg and I have spoken about this in some other talks we've done. And I think Jim's a few years younger, but he would have been, sophomore or junior in high school or something like that. And it hit us both in very profound ways. And I was confident, when I first approached Steve about it. Steve and I had worked together on a book I made called Little Nemo, Dream Another Dream. And Jim had been the person who introduced us, so to speak. And that led to Steve and I staying in touch. And Steve did a couple pages for these books that I edited and helped put together called The Golem of Venice Beach. And somewhere after The Golem, I'd been started to do a bunch of freelance comic book editing and putting teams together and sort of book packaging type stuff without actually being a book packager. And I started to think about, maybe doing some of my own stuff again, like I had done with Little Nemo. And, I'd mentioned it to Steve because I'd always believed in it and it had never been collected. And, it's one of the great works that people just haven't really had a chance to see. And at this point, it's a couple generations, I felt like, haven't seen it. So I thought that, given all the factors, it would be successful. I was fairly confident in that. I've done some, crowdfunding work in my role as a, guy who puts the books together. And I've been lucky to work alongside some campaigns that did quite well. And I got to see what worked and what didn't and, form my own opinions on that stuff. But honestly, it's we're feeling great right now. And there's a lot of work to do and planning and stuff to put in place. But I always say, there's experts on this stuff, but there's no real secret or mystery to it. It hits or it doesn't. And this hits because of the work. It hits because of what Steve did and who Steve is. And not to humble you, Steve, but Steve's place in comics history, Steve's place to the generation of creators who are at the forefront of working right now today, guys in their 30s, 40s, 50s. When you combine that with Jim Rugg's involvement, Jim is a beloved figure in comics, and he's earned that position through being a terrific champion of comics and historian of comics with cartoonist Fabe.
And a great comics creator. I love Jim's work.
And his own work.
Yeah.
Jim's an Eisner-winning designer, right? So
yeah.
So I did think, guys, I thought we would do well. it's good to be in a position where, I'm happy to say that it exceeded my, I thought we would have a very strong first day and be in a position for the full 30 days to be pretty special, hopefully. And it certainly looks like we are. And I think we're a little ahead of where I hoped we would be. So no, it's fantastic. And I'm glad that the campaign and the stuff that we put together is resonating with people, and they're going there and they're finding stuff that they want to add to the books. It's not just the books that they're getting. I think they'll walk away. Hopefully we've got some events planned and some promo stuff to go over the next month. And I think I like to think of it as kind of a Tyrant experience. It's a sort of once in a lifetime thing. You can't say that too often. This won't happen again. There won't be, unless there's new Tyrant, and we won't get into that right now. Right, Steve?
Well, it could happen. I mean, what I'm looking at is making me understand that, it's not like I wasted the past 30 years. I've had multiple careers, since stepping away from self-publishing in the 90s, but this is really forcing me to rethink, what am I going to do with the time I have left? And just as 1963 allowed me to do Tyrant in the first place, this crowdfunder may well allow me to do something with Tyrant in the second place. So we'll see.
Well, that would be the most beautiful result of all, but people are discovering it, and the messages and stuff that we're getting and the reaction to it. And so, thanks so much, guys. It's great to hear your enthusiasm for it and that it's hitting people as a success. I've seen first days. I've been lucky to be part of some ones that the first days have been 6-figure first days. Mm-hmm. And, it's a hard thing. There's a velocity to it. I don't know how else to say it. And you honestly know, and I'm not talking about looking at data in the dashboard. I'm just saying, just watching the scroll that anybody could watch, right? There's like, you sort of know after 40 minutes, honestly, if it's going to be what you're hoping for.
I was going to say,
it was a good morning. I had one of my closest friends and people who helped me the most in the week leading up to the launch. Andrew Carl, my old partner, who's been helping me put some of this together. I said, "Oh man, I'm a little worried. This is like maybe 45 minutes. This is, you guys, we can all laugh now, but about 45 minutes in, I said, "Oh, I'm a little worried. It doesn't have the velocity." And he just said, "Man," he said, "you're just too greedy for velocity." He said, "You can relax." and I said, "All right." And I'm not a greedy person, so put it in perspective. So it was it was.
Bear in mind too, for me, I mean, it was a really hard decision back in 96 to step away from the project. I mean, there were real life and death issues on the line when the distribution machinery that had made self-publishing so viable suddenly fall apart. And I also have to say that, and this certainly colored my initial conversations with you, Chris, was it's not that I looked at this ever as a failure. I knew I had done my best work I could possibly do when I was working on Tyrant. But I hadn't hit my goalpost. The first collected edition of Tyrant was going to be after I did Tyrant number 6. I had a clear story point that was my destination, and that's part of what Jim and Ed reconfigured for me when I heard them talking about what Tyrant meant to them, and also, point blank, there's Ed saying, "Come on, Uncle Steve, you got to get this out," having taught the current or a portion of the current generation of graphic novelists and cartoonists for 15 years, I always listened to the current generation, you two included, Ken and Rich. And when I was getting that clear a signal, it reinforced everything you'd been saying to me, Chris, for probably a year and a half or 2 years by that point. So not that I didn't believe you, but it really did make a difference because Jim and Ed were seeing what there was, and I was only recognizing what I hadn't been able to do, and it made a big difference to hear what it meant to a reader looking at Tyrant now that this works. Just get this out there.
I think it also, I don't want to, I don't want to put thoughts in your head, Steve, or, but I imagine it also had to have a great effect that they are both, highly skilled working comic book. and
Oh,
they
yeah.
were saying it. Yeah, that had to hit you in a certain way that it doesn't bother me at all. I realize that would hit you differently than me saying it. I totally understand that, and I'm so thankful that that all exists.
Yeah, I
And
don't think that was it, Chris. It wasn't that I wasn't hearing you. It was that, when you sit and spend a half hour or more with somebody who's going page after page through
yeah, yeah.
something you did, and they're
With
talking
pure
about
passion.
what it does to them as they're going through it, that was a really transformative, that was a really transformative podcast.
As it should be, and like I said, the groundswell for it is incredible.
Mhm.
As people, as we've done interviews and with Kickstarters and everything, and have friends and other people have done Kickstarters, so we're used to watching those bars and those lines, and it's just like it was something in real time as we're watching this thing, and it's like, oh, is that this? No, oh no, it's that, no, it was like instantly changing, and it was like, so I was like, oh, okay, well, this is definitely got a lot of like. It's wonderful. It has a lot of hype behind it because it is something different. And I think, in my opinion, and I wish, because I was just a young kid getting into comics in the mid 90s when this came out. Like, so I was only in that phase of like Batman and Superman, if you will. I wish I would have seen this book back then because I love dinosaurs. But now, looking at what we do now in 2026, there's such a need and want for things that are outside of the normal comic book / superhero realm. This is like almost custom made for people to come back to now, because a lot of people are looking for something different and looking for something that has a little bit, different to bring to the table. And this definitely does.
Well, comics have changed so much in the last 30 plus years. I mean, Rich, the point you're making, what was considered mainstream when you were growing up, the landscape has altered completely. Memoir comics were not a thing in the mid 90s. They were just beginning to bubble up. We're in what I consider the richest period of comic reading I've ever enjoyed in my life. Like, there seems to be no limit to what genres are finding purchase right now, finding readership. There also seems to be, it's as if we culturally had finally pulled off the blinders and realized, oh, comics don't just have to be ABC, and usually ABC were all superheroes. I think that also means that people's appetites for trying something different is there's a richer palette there now because they've grown up with so many different things. When I was entering the field as a Kubert School student in '77, it was even narrower. I mean, my classmate Tom Yates, who's currently the artist on Prince Valiant, working with Mark Schultz of Xenozoic Tales as a writer, Tom dreamed of doing adventure comics, and there were no adventure comics. And I was aching to do horror comics, and there sort of were no horror comics in the mid 70s. They were watered down, wannabe horror comics, House of Mystery and so on, but there just wasn't anything that had any teeth. And certainly the same was true in, the aspect of genres that I was looking to explore with a project like Tyrant. It's funny, though, how everything changed in the mid 90s. I mean, one of my favorite comics is Ricardo Delgado's Age of Reptiles for obvious reasons, right? And because that was released not as a self-published project, but under the imprimatur of Dark Horse Comics, Ricardo was able to get a much broader reach with Age of Reptiles than I was ever going to achieve as a self-publisher. That's really changed. And that point was not lost on me. I mean, during that 15 years teaching at the Center for Cartoon Studies, we had students who came in the door already with full careers, thanks to Patreon, crowdfunding, their online comics, making them very visible cartoonists. And they were at the school in order to get themselves to the next level as creators. And I also saw students and fellow faculty members getting their feet wet with crowdfunding. So, Chris, when you reached out to me, I had like a loose working knowledge, secondhand, thirdhand of how crowdfunding worked. And I was very thankful that I had gotten to work with you earlier on the Little Nemo project, just as, a one-page contributor. But you invited me to be more attentive and a bit more involved with the Golem of Venice Beach, even though it was just a couple pages I was doing. And watching how that was orchestrated, how well you handled the whole thing. And as I've said on other podcasts, one of the things I'll say to you, Ken and Rich, is, whenever Chris promised me something, he came through with it. So there was also a bond of trust there that we had built up through the prior 2 projects that Chris had invited me in on. And that included some disappointments. You know, the piece that was published in Chris's Dream a Little Dream was the last published Tyrant work I had ever done. It was a 1-pager called Tyrant in Slumberland. It was about what baby Tyrant dreams about, which is eating everything, right? And it had a place in Chris's crowdfunded first edition, but it did not get a place in the mass market edition that followed. That's okay. I knew it wasn't, you know, it wasn't Chris's call.
You know what's funny? This gives me the chance on the record. I love it. This is perfect.
Go for it. Go for it, Chris.
Ken and Rich, here's a scoop. Here's a scoop, Ken and Rich. You know, Steve, no, I'm joking, and you know, it's all laughs. But no, so there was what Steve's referring to is my company, Locust Moon, where I had 2 partners, Andrew Carl and Josh O'Neill, who went on to found Beehive Books. We published through Locust Moon the Little Nemo Dream Another Dream book. And Francois Mouly, who I have the utmost respect for her place in comics history, she reached out about Toon Books, where she was the editor-in-chief, or I guess maybe it was her imprint, or whatever.
Her imprint. Yeah, it is her
whatever
imprint.
The exact nature was. We had a very interesting negotiation with Francois that was held over the phone, where she would randomly call the comic shop and seek to negotiate the contract that we had. And that was one of my more interesting Nemo memories. That was fun. And you know, our names are on there as editors, Steve, but she chose all the pages.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's how it works.
That's how it works.
I totally understood that at the time, and in no way did that drive any kind of wedge between you and I, because I know how the business works.
I know.
And I also know that when you're going through that process of you completed and published a work, when you're working with a secondary publisher, you know, in my own life experience, I did 8 volumes of Taboo as sole, you know, primary editor, where I determined what was in each issue. The last 2 volumes of Taboo were done with Kitchen Sink Press. After they had merged or taken over or been taken over by Tundra, Kevin Eastman Company, depending on which version of that event you choose to subscribe to. And Dennis made it clear, you know, when I sat down with him and showed him the unpublished Taboo material, that there was stuff I had published that Dennis never would have touched with a 10-foot pole. And those last 2 volumes of Taboo, 8 and 9, which I'm still very proud of, you know, those did not reflect what I would have done with the final 2 volumes of Taboo. But those are the decisions you make when you're working with a publisher. And that was the case for you, Chris, when you were working with Francois. Once it was going to be a Toon book, it was Francois's book that was going to be out there. And it was going to be Francois's edition of what you and your partner had put together. And you know, that's how it works. That's how
there's an interesting tie-in to the team here, where, to end on the Toon Books and Francois note, the Little Nemo book that we published, that Locust Moon put out, the 16x21 tribute book, that last page of that book was sadly the late great John Cassaday, and that was the closing page of that of the book that we put out. When Francois put out her version, which was greatly abridged, I think, you know, it had maybe less than half of the pages, or less than half of the artist, maybe even a third. But she chose, and it was a beautiful choice, and it was among our final choices for the closing page of our book. She chose Jim Rugg. So Jim Rugg is the final page of the Toon Books edition. And Jim was the designer of the Nemo books, and he's the designer of both editions of the book we're doing on the campaign right now. He designed the blacklight posters, and you know, most of the items, not all. The puzzle wasn't designed by Jim, and the bookmark, but everything else was pretty much, you know, through Jim. So there's great connection, as tenuous as it was over the time, and you know, maybe we all didn't talk a lot, but we do go back to this Little Nemo book, and you know, I'm happy that all happened, Steve. You know, I'm happy that Tyrant page was made for, what was it made for, Steve? Sundays it was called?
It was originally done for an anthology that a group of our students at the Center for Cartoon Studies had put together for one of the big New York shows in their graduating year. And it was an anthology called Sundays. And appropriate to Dream a Little Dream, they were excited by the Sunday pages I had brought into the classroom. I taught the equivalent of a comics history class at CCS. And I brought in original Sunday pages, which were gigantic. I mean, the three of you have seen old Sunday pages from the early 20th century. You know, you could paper your entire backseat of your car with one of those. And they wanted to emulate that format. And they did a giant size self-published anthology called Sundays. And the setup at the Center for Cartoon Studies is the basement lab has everything you need to self-publish in any format you want to self-publish. And they did this gorgeous, handsome anthology. And as occasionally happened during my 15 years, when the students might, or an alum invites me in on something, I often accept the invitation. And I did my last Tyrant piece for Sundays. I'm very happy that we're including it in the complete Tyrant edition that is coming out. And I still had the original art, of course. So, and there were multiple endings I had drawn. So I think Jim and Chris are making sure that the reader will be able to see every last panel that I had toyed with. So
it'll all be there.
It all fits together. It all fits together.
That's why I say everybody needs to go get this book, because it is so much amazing material in this. Like, this is not just a normal Kickstarter campaign. But Stephen, let me ask you this, because obviously you've dabbled in self-publishing before. Did you ever think when you were doing that, it would ever evolve to what it is now with Kickstarter and campaigns like this?
That's a great question, Ken. And I have to say, I was very close friends with Scott and Ivy McLeod back in the late 80s, early 90s. And it's not that we ever stopped being friends. It's just, you know, geographically we moved apart. We each raised families. But Scott was talking about this kind of thing in the late 1980s. I kid you not. And then in the early 90s, I remember conversations with Scott where he was saying, you know, when micro payments become possible, it will be possible for cartoonists to fund their work via micropayments, where, you know, a fan can kick in just a little bit of money, but if they build a fan base, that can be enough. And, you know, that's Patreon. That's, you know, Scott was talking about what manifested as Patreon. And crowdfunding is another variant that it's not like Scott laid it out and went, yes, there will be a means of, you know, but he was talking about early possibilities and possible permutations and extrapolations on that. And crowdfunding is one of those. Crowdfunding is this remarkable vehicle. You know, when I was self-publishing Tyrant, it was this months-long process where, you know, I had to solicit the issue months before it was going to be printed. Right? You had to put the solicitation into the hands of the distributors so it would go into the catalog. It would appear in the catalog 2 months before the book was actually going to be in comic book shops. It was this prolonged process where, and I always found it crazy. Like, I'm a consumer, you know, I impulse bought comics all my life when they used to be on the newsstand. Now, if I wanted to have a certain comic, I had to decide 2 months before the comic even existed, not only that I wanted that comic, but I had to get my hands on a Diamond or a Capital catalog or whatever the regional distributor my retailer worked with. I had to make my purchase decision in advance, and the retailer needed a commitment from me in order to order that oddball thing. There was a no risk if I was interested in X-Men. It was high risk if I was interested in, this weird comic called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. Yeah, I think I might want to read that 2.5 months from now. And we never knew on our end of the equation, as a self-publisher and somebody who was writing, drawing, laying out, you know, doing the production on their own comic, I had to be thinking about, well, when do I promote my work, right? Am I promoting my work when I solicit it? Am I promoting it to the distributor, or am I promoting it to the retailer? Or should I be promoting it to the end reader so that they ask the retailer to order it, even though they're not going to even have it in their arm's reach for another 2 to 3 months? It was a crazy system. That it lasted as long as it did is phenomenal. I mean, the direct sale market, from its early beginnings in the very late 60s and early 70s up until it's still ongoing, the direct sale market is still viable. There are still great comic shops out there. But there's just a lot fewer of them than there were in the 80s and 90s when we were in our boom years. Now with crowdfunding, all of that, I mean, Chris and Jim and Sean and the entire team that worked at Lighthouse to make this reality have been working on this we've been working on this for 2 years now. From the point when I opened up my flat files to start pulling out Tyrant art to the present day is a little over 2 years. But during that time, the target that Chris made very clear was the crowdfunding, which means in a 4-week window, in this case, we are doing what used to take months to do. Essentially, we are now able to solicit, promote, and essentially distribute these projects within the period of time that the crowdfunder exists. And I'm really excited by that. And I was excited when I first heard of it. And I went in very early on crowdfunding, I don't know, 10, 12, many years ago on early projects, in part because as a consumer, I wanted to figure out how it worked. As a historian, it's a nightmare because I know that there's work that's come out that might be some of the best graphic novels and comics that ever existed. But if I miss the crowdfunder, I may never see them or have access to them.
Right.
And that's going to get really tough when somebody's trying to write the history of, oh, what was happening in graphic novels between, say, 2020 and 2030? Are they even going to be able to access some of the work that came out during that decade? But on our end, you know, for me as a former self-publisher and a creator who still owned this particular body of work, and for Chris and his team at Lighthouse, everything was about focusing on, okay, we got to have everything ready so that during that month-long window, it's all going to run smoothly. And that's part of, you know, having that time is part. Chris wasn't the one and Jim wasn't the one who said, hey, Steve, why don't you do some ceramics? I knew there was this downtime and I just thought, okay, I've seen how crowdfunding works. I've been a consumer of crowdfunding. I want to make some really cool perks that nobody can get anywhere else. And, you know, and that was a lot of the thought that went into building the campaign that kicked off yesterday morning.
You know, I'm glad you
I'm
said
sorry.
Sorry. Because the ceramics is what got us over the top.
Yeah.
Like there was one of those, there's somebody as we, like I said, we are involved in a lot of Kickstarters. We support Kickstarters, obviously, as much as we, you know, do stuff, you know, in the comic book business. We are also, you know, fans.
Yes.
And so we go out and support a lot of things. And so like, you're used to seeing add-ons, you're used to seeing the posters, you're used to seeing, you know, the different kind of covers and such. Ceramics, not all the time we're used to seeing, and not especially like looks so cool.
Yes.
So we were both over the moon after seeing them. And like, how did you come up with the idea? Obviously you kind of said there because of being a consumer yourself, but like the process of this is amazing. And if you haven't seen it, check that Kickstarter out when you go visit Kickstarter, because you need to.
Yes.
And look at these. They're amazing.
Well, about 15 years ago, I mean, I was teaching from 2005 to 2020. About 15 or 16 years ago, as part of teaching at the Center for Cartoon Studies, there was a local multi-dealer antique mall in Ottaquechee, Vermont, which is close by, about 20 minutes from my house tops. And I rented a booth as a dealer because I wanted there to be a local venue where the students could put their mini comics and zines, because some of the best comics I ever read in my life was the work the students were doing, sometimes as a matter of assignment, sometimes, they're self-motivated projects. And I wanted also to have something unique in the booth. And there's a local pottery shop, Tip Top Pottery, where they have the prefab mugs and bowls, the bear ceramics are there. And I started hand painting zombie coffee mugs, where I would write zombie coffee on one side of the mug and do a zombie face on the other side of the mug, and have the interior with blood red, so that your morning coffee had a little bit of the Living Dead flavor to it.
So
and I would make about one or two of those a month, and I would just stick them in the booth, and there was no way to price them fairly. I mean, it's not a matter of the cost of the cup or the bowl. It's a matter of, there's no way I'm going to compensate for the work that went into it. So I made them affordable. I think I was selling them for $25 each or something. And they always sold. There's a handful of people out there in the world with zombie coffee mugs by Steve Bissette. I occasionally would give them to friends as birthday gifts. I'm pretty sure Rick Veach still has the one that I made for him. So that was kind of what, I hadn't done anything like that for a number of years. And when it was decided by Chris and Jim that we were going to do this crowdfunder, there's one of the mugs right there that Chris is holding up. I thought, let me go back and do them, but let me do some dinosaur mugs and bowls and skulls and, you know. So I'd gotten pretty, I won't say expertise, but I'd gotten comfortable with working with the kind of paints and materials. Part of what you have to do when you're painting these things is you've got to picture what they're going to look like after they come out of the kiln, because the colors you're laying down look nothing like what the final kilned ceramic comes out as. But that's part of the fun of making artwork. You know, you sit down with a blank piece of paper and watercolors, you're not sure what you're going to end up with at the end. And they were a lot of fun to do. I just wish I'd had another 6 months to make more of them, but I did as many as I could. And I started sending photos to Chris and Jim before they had been fired. I sent them both photos of just the raw paint. And, you know, both of you were like, oh my God, you know, this is great. And they're all signed on the bottom, and I've asked Chris to make sure a little piece of paper goes in saying, do not microwave. Never microwave your Tyrant ceramics, folks, because they will detonate in the microwave. So anyway, that's where they came from, Ken, is the zombie coffee mugs were my earlier incarnation. And given the reaction I'm getting from folks like yourself, I guess I should take some time this summer, go back in the ceramic shop and make a few more cool items. So.
I mean, you're just incredible. I'm sorry, Chris, go.
Oh no, I was just going to say it's the thing that people, it's the, you know, by far the thing that people wish there was more of. And I think, Steve, no lie, could be a good little side hustle for you. I think we would have sold.
Maybe so, but I got to tell you, there's no way to charge enough money to cover the time and so on.
No, and we honestly made them. I feel like we priced them very affordably. Didn't try to. We wanted people to be able to scoop them up, even the Triceratops, and it's going to be hard. And if the backer out there who got this beauty's listening, don't worry. We're just having fun, but it's going to be hard to ship this guy out. You know, it's going to be hard to send him all.
I safely got them from me to you. You just need about 100 pounds of bubble wrap in a really big box to make sure that
it's going to be hard to let them go.
Yeah. Well, you know, Chris, your birthday's coming up at some point. You may end up with some cool ceramic. So, the other thing was I had also kept over the years, you know, complete print runs of the Carnosaur portfolio that I did back in 1989 for Peregrine Press. I still had original copies of the Faces of Fear folio that a good friend of mine, Steve, had done years ago when he was working at a print shop in, I think, Greenfield, Massachusetts. And I you know, pulled all that stuff together in the time that we had to work toward launching the crowdfunder. And I would bounce off Chris, do you think this would fly? And, you know, I knew, again, as a consumer of films, as well as I should say, you know, Blu-rays, as well as graphic novels and books and other things from crowdfunding, that the variety of bonus items that could be offered was very important. I signed some sets of Tyrant. I signed and sent Chris copies of my Paleo Pop books, which are available on Amazon, but the printer proofs that Chris is going to be able to offer as part of the crowdfunder are unique in that they're essentially first editions of those books. So, you know, I just tried to really think about, okay, what would be a cool thing? And in some cases, a one-of-a-kind thing like those ceramics, and in other cases, just rare collectibles that were long out of print that I had been either stupid enough or diligent enough to hold on to, you know, schlepping from move to move these giant boxes of portfolios.
Oh, I have this great. Sorry, I've got this great. When Steve says some of the crazy stuff, I never saw this in my life, and I can't find it. Oh, Steve. Oh, here it is. Here it is, guys. Look at this. Some lucky person will wind up with this. We unlocked our first stretch goal, and I'm getting the whole plan together for that. So we haven't sent out the official update, but we unlocked our first stretch goal at 160K, and the goal, the what we're unlocking was this live Zoom with Steve and Jim, where we'll do some giveaways with some of the stuff that Steve's just mentioned, some of Steve's personal artifacts, and one of them that will probably be involved that night. We'll send the date out with that in the update. You know, probably tomorrow we'll send that out. But anyway, look at this, guys. I'll try to.
Oh, it's the horrified B-movie victims. Yes.
Oh my God. That's
This is
amazing.
a plastic set that I had on a shelf in my drawing studio for years of little plastic replicas of those people on 1950s horror movie and monster movie posters that were always running away from the burning city.
Of all the stuff you sent me, and all of it's a joy to open. I'm like a kid on Christmas morning. But that one, when I opened it, I see the shape of it. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I open it. I'm like, what? I mean, it got even better. Yeah. So good. Yeah. It's it is actually called Horrified B-Movie Victims, the set.
Yeah. And even though Tyrant isn't destroying New York City, it just seemed appropriate that the B-movie victims were part of the mix.
Of course.
I mean, I worked for over a decade in the video retail and rental industry. When I left self-publishing and the American comic book scene in the 90s, I worked as a video retailer, and I was a co-manager and a buyer at a video superstore. And I had kept a number of cool items, and I actually had the original promo item that was sent to video stores from the Rugrats movie of the Reptar watch, right? The dinosaur character Reptar and that watch is going to be in the mix of goodies.
Let's go.
Offering up. Wow. And I still had it in the original box and the original bubble wrap and everything. So I really tried to dig deep into what dinosaur or dinosaur related curios did I have in the collection to throw in there, so that people are getting something out of my studio, which gives them a more personal interface, if you will, because those are all things that I kept in my creative space during the years I was working on many, many, many projects, including Tyrant.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Like I say, just to have that personal connection, like I say, as a fan getting that's just overwhelmingly like giving, and just one of those moments like you'll never forget, especially with the connection with this book, and especially with how it's resonating with fans too. And especially with a phrase that jumps out with this book that I've seen in a couple different press releases for it, is comprehensively exhaustive. For both of you, what does that mean about giving this legacy its proper due in this day and age?
Chris, over to you.
For me, it means that I think the generations move a little faster now, and I think by my count, which might be strange math, there's 2 or 3 generations that don't know anything about Tyrant, and if they do, it's mostly from God bless the cartoonist kayfabe video. I think people under 35 and under, if they know Tyrant, they know it because of that video. In what we'll be presenting in the complete edition, just to speak to the comprehensively exhaustive, will be the fullest document possible of just what Jim Rugg and I believe, with all our hearts, is a masterwork of comics, a work created by one of the people responsible for helping push comics forward in the 1980s and helping comics mature and become a medium and not just a genre of superheroes for the most part. And it was done as at the height of those powers of someone who harnessed all their cartooning powers and put it into these 80 some pages of what that comprise the Tyrant story proper. And throughout the rest of the book, which will round out well over 200 pages, the complete edition, you'll be treated to a series of essays from Dr. Michael Ryan, who's a paleontologist that Steve goes way back with to the days of the creation of Tyrant, essays from Rick Veitch, essays from really one of the gems is a 7,000 word essay by Steve, where we asked Steve to, hey, like, we want this, was originally intended just to be in the original art edition. And, when you're calling something comprehensively exhaustive, got to end up in both places. But yeah, there's a 7,000 word essay from Steve. There's tributes from people you probably wouldn't expect in terms of, and I don't say this in any denigrating way, but there's going to be a couple text pieces in there from people no one's ever heard of. And, but they're there for a reason, to round out the fullness of, the full scope of what Tyrant was in its time. What it's become as it's gathered its legacy these past 30 years, and now what it is as it's, knock on wood, it has literally roared back to life, it seems. So the comprehensively exhaustive really does just speak to, I I told Steve when we were making the contract, like in terms of the terms or whatever, we could put 6 months. It wouldn't bother me because there will never be a need to make another Tyrant book after this, as far as just collecting the material. So that's kind of what it means to me. We do have plans and hopes for what we're calling the library edition, and we're hoping that this campaign is successful enough that we attract the right sort of publishing partner to get into more of a mass market scale for an all ages colored edition that Jose Villarrubia is set to color if we can get to that point. So we have plans for that. But as far as the comprehensively exhaustive, the 2 books that are in the campaign, the complete edition, which is the one I was really just talking about, and the original art edition, which again collects every single Tyrant page. It's just in the original art format, which I'm guessing most of your audience is familiar with, but just in case, it's scans of the original art, the book produced at the same size, a little bit bigger, and it's like you're holding the original art in your hands, so to speak. So between both books, every existing piece of Tyrant material, including Steve's correspondence from those days with his printer, including on and on I could go. I
went back into my flat files and tried to pull every piece of dinosaur art I'd ever done. And that includes, in the case of stories I totally owned, like Scraps, which was originally published in a zine called Third Rail that one of my Kubert School classmates, Ken Fedunowitz, who sadly is no longer with us, Ken had offered me the venue to do just a dinosaur story. And it was the first publisher who ever did that. And we're including Scraps in the complete edition. We're including the 1-pager I did for my Joe Kubert School. We didn't have a yearbook at the Kubert School. There weren't enough students, and it was a brand new school. Then Joe and Muriel didn't really know what it was going to be. But we did a comic format zine called Manticore, and I did a 1-pager with a prehistoric theme. That's in the complete edition. And with Chris and Jim's encouragement, I also dug into my flat files, and we're going to present sample pages of material I had done for mainstream publishers that had a prehistoric theme as well. So it's going to really allow the reader to see, the body of work that I had done prior to launching Tyrant that really fed the what turned into the flames of, I got to do this book. So the complete edition's really going to live up to the name. If anything doesn't make it in there, it's only because I didn't find the piece of paper in time. You can see stacks behind me here. I'm still digging through stuff because Jim and Chris, I refer to something in the text essay I did, and both Jim and Chris were like, do you still have that letter? So I'm looking for it, Chris. I'm still looking for it. It's here someplace.
I know. Heartless taskmasters, the word.
No. It's a good task, and if you guys don't do it, nobody's going to. So it's a job.
I know.
And that's what
I'm glad those 2 words stuck with you, though, Ken. I'm glad those 2 words stuck with you. When I wrote that, a couple of my trusted companions teased me a little. They said comprehensively exhausted. I said I'm sticking with it. That's what it is. So I'm glad those 2 words resonated.
Yeah, because going through with how much is in there, and for whoever you're listening or watching this episode from, trying to explain it is tough because there is so much in this, and I think that's just such a benefit to the readers. Like, you're literally pouring everything into this, and like when you're saying it's like an exhaustive, it's not like a detriment. Like, it is like literally you are giving everything to the reader. And to get that for a bang for your buck, like, that is such a deal in itself. But just to have that legacy come out and just all encompass everything that is Tyrant from then to now, it's truly something special. I can't reiterate that enough.
I was going to say it's super exciting. Super exciting.
The complete edition means what it says too. It's going to include the letters pages. $2.95 is what black and white comics were going for back in the mid 90s, and that was a high price tag, I thought, as a reader, right? I mean, comics were, I remember 10 and 12-cent comics, guys, so when I was doing Tyrant, every issue had the comic story chapter, but I would also pack the final pages of the book with movie reviews. There's a full review of Jurassic Park. There's a terrific essay by my good friend Douglas Winter, who's best known as the biographer of Stephen King and Clive Barker and other horror writers. He did a great essay about what Rodan the Flying Monster, the 1957 Toho companion to Godzilla, what that movie meant to him as a kid and as an adult now. I packed Tyrant with as much reading material as I could because I wanted the reader to get $2.95 worth of reading material. And all of that, I had kept all the paste ups and mechanicals of the original pages. This is all pre-digital era. And that's all going into the complete edition. We're also including the great Mark Martin's Bless the Beast, which was the inside back cover cartoon feature in every issue of Tyrant, which is about 2 Tyrannosaurus Rexes that somehow make it onto Noah's Ark, and how does that go? So it's going to be quite a feast for anyone who's genuinely interested in not just Tyrant but dinosaurs in the pop culture, how comics are made. I mean, the complete edition is going to feed a lot of appetites, I hope.
And you're definitely getting the bang for your buck. So you're continuing to do that. And if you were worried about the $2.95, you do not want to see what my pull list price looks like these days. But staying on a different note, keeping it, because I'm glad you were talking about more dinosaur stories, because I want to have a little fun here. And I'm going to make it hard on you. You cannot pick Tyrant, even though it may be your favorite.
Oh, no. I'm not going to pick Tyrant. No.
What is your favorite dinosaur story? It could be movie, it could be comic book, it could be novel, any medium you want to pick. You want to pick multiple, that's fine. But what is your favorite dinosaur story for both of you?
Wow, that's a great question. My favorite is The Valley of Gwangi, the 1969 Ray Harryhausen Cowboys and Dinosaurs movie. The first movie I ever saw with dinosaurs was The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which is one of my favorite dinosaur anythings. But if I have, 2 hours to kill and nothing that's burdening my shoulders, I think probably once a year I pop in that gorgeous transfer of the full color Valley of Gwangi. And it brings me back to the matinee that I got to see back when I was 14 years old. There's a moment in the film where Gwangi is an Allosaurus. And there's a moment in the film where Gwangi is introduced. And he's introduced by leaping over your head onto the action on the screen. And every time I see that moment in the film, I feel the foot in the back of my head from the kid that was sitting behind me in the movie theater who kicked me in the head when Gwangi jumped into the movie. So for me, it's Valley of Gwangi. I could pick more intellectually pleasing items as a favorite dinosaur or something, but Valley of Gwangi scratches all my dino itches.
Love it. What about you, Chris?
Rich, for me, it would be, I can't choose Tyrant, and second place would be pretty easy, honestly. For me, it would be the manga Gone. I'm a huge fan and admirer of Tanaka, and those stories are so singular. Steve spoke at the beginning of this a little bit, and it's come up in some of the talks we've done where Steve, when he was a little boy in the late 50s, early 60s, and he wanted to get his head into the characters of the dinosaurs or of the animals, that sort of experience. The way Tanaka does it, and just his draftsmanship, just all of it, the storytelling. And I'm not especially for where the zeitgeist is, I'm not a particular, manga's not my aesthetic, let's just say. But Gone is something special. Yeah, the next Lighthouse project, which we'll announce, maybe 6 weeks after things wrap up with this and we're close to getting the books into people's hands, the next Lighthouse project will include it's with Paul Pope, and it will include an original art edition component. And I have no plans of becoming like an original art edition type thing. That just is a happenstance of Tyrant and the project with Paul. But that said, a dream of mine is a Gone artist edition.
Oh God, I would kill for that, Chris.
And the thing with Tanaka is as far as I know, he's in the great limited minority of manga artists who did not use a team. He did the pages himself, which in theory leads one to think that those originals might be a little easier to get your hands on and figure out than you know, if a whole team was involved with producing the pages. So yeah, that little dinosaur, Rich, I love that little sucker. He's you know, I like him. That would be it for me.
I
was
love
gonna say,
Gone. I still have the original manga paperbacks from Japan. I've got the iterations that were published here in North America. And I have fond memories of my Chicago area friends back in the 90s. Larry Martyr, who was doing Bean World at that time, and his late wife, Corey. Steve Harold and Tim Gagney, who worked with the Diamond Warehouse at the time. They took me to this terrific Japanese store that was in this big mall outside of Chicago. And when I went in, there was an orange Gone figure about this tall, right?
Oh, man.
And it was on the top of a shelf. And God, I wanted to buy that, but it was just for display only, right?
You're gonna send me to eBay after this, man.
I've never seen one again, you know. But oh my God, yeah, I'm a huge Gone fan. Terrific comic.
Well, you know what's funny, and I'm sorry, guys, I'm thinking out loud.
No, by all means.
You know, Paul Pope is very. I mentioned he'll be the next Lighthouse project, and Paul is sort of famously the only, however they phrase it, but basically the only American artist to ever have Kodansha say, "Come live here," and you know, make comics for us. And we don't get into that whole story; it would take too much time. Most of that stuff never wound up coming out, you know, and being published over there. But he lived over there for a while, and when I think about it, I you know, I haven't really. I've talked about it a little bit with him, but you know. Kodansha was the Gone publisher over there.
Yeah,
so no, it's in my mind. You guys will be the first to know if it happens.
All right, very excited.
I'm very excited about that.
Very excited about that. Before we let you go, one more question though for you. Obviously, this has been a labor of love that's come from the 90s to now. How does it feel that now, once this book is finally done with the campaign, like what is going to be the exact reaction you're going to have that this book is finally coming out for both of you?
Well, I'll go first. So Steve has
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, you should have the last word, my friend. For me, it'll really be, you know, it's hard to say. There's moments of these things where I'm not particularly motivated by money, you know, like the money's a means to an end, and you want to do well, but it's the satisfaction of the proof of labor, which is a phrase I'm borrowing from Raymond Carver, a writer that I admire, and he wrote this great essay about what's a man have except for his proof of labor. And for me, when the books are out and they're in people's hands and I'm holding the book, that proof of labor will be immensely satisfying, just because it's a work that I care about so much. And Steve's been a name and a figure, even though I've only known Steve for 15 years, you know, he's been a name and a figure in my life, you know, just due to his career and the Alan Moore Swamp Thing run since I was 8 years old. So to have played a part in bringing what I know is a comic book masterwork, you know, like I said, to new audience, it'll be immensely satisfying, very, very satisfying.
I can't predict how I'm going to feel when I hold these books in my hand. I mean, I'm literally living for the day that they arrive. I just turned 71 this past week, and I'm thankful for every day I'm above dirt. You know, I've outlived a lot of good people who I loved deeply. I wish they'd been here for this, including Marge's my son Mike and my parents who aren't here. But I'm glad I made it to the day that I'll be able to hold the book. So knock on wood, I'll be here. And then the big question for me is what's next? I mean, you know, I told you all from the get-go with this conversation that it was really the nest egg that 1963 provided, the 6 issues that I collaborated on with close friends for Image Comics that allowed me to do Tyrant. And just looking at, I mean, we're only, 2.5 days into this Kickstarter. It looks like, I mean, if I'm able to buy a couple more years and do some new Tyrant material, that may be what I pursue. I've got a lot of other projects on the table. I mean, I was just told recently, and it was recently announced, that I'm the next Vermont Cartoonist Laureate. Vermont is the only state in the union that has a Cartoonist Laureate, and I'm the 6th to take this position. And I only said yes because I said to James Sturm when he approached me about being Cartoonist Laureate, I said, I'll do it if I can get the help and the funding to do a book on Vermont cartoonists. I'm one of the current generation of Vermont cartoonists, but there's been very, very many Vermont cartoonists, including comic artists. You guys know their work. Gene Colan, Frank Miller, who lived in Vermont. And those were the conditions. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we could go on and on. Rick Veitch. So I've got other projects on the table, but I haven't mentioned, I have mentioned it to Chris before, but Paul Karasik does a summer workshop at the Center for Cartoon Studies every summer called Graphic Novel Workshop, where you bring in a project and you workshop it with a group of fellow creators. And thanks to Paul, I have workshopped and prepared not one, but two original Tyrant stories, fully scripted, laid out, that I never took the time to complete. And that means there's two works in the drawer that I could jump into. So, as I said earlier, I'm really rethinking, with whatever time I have left on this planet, what do I want to do with my life? And I've got a lot of projects I'm in the middle of. I've got a lot of projects I'm committed to. I do work with Blu-ray and 4K labels. I just got 2 new jobs this week alone on 2 films I really love, doing commentary tracks or bonus features. But this may make it well possible to take part of the financial burden off my wife my shoulders long enough that maybe I can get those 2 stories done and more. We'll see.
Awesome.
Well, if there's any reaction from the Kickstarter campaign, I think the karma is in your favor. And this book, we cannot stress enough, folks, is comic history. To see the passion behind this, to finish the story and get it out to the audience, and the reaction of the fans, let alone, is enough to sell you on this. But when you see the art is amazing in this. And to take a story that, it's a dinosaur story, but it's one that you have not seen before from this perspective, and getting all that comes with it in the complete set, it's truly something that you cannot afford to miss, and I cannot recommend it enough. Steven, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk to us. We definitely have to recap after the campaign's done.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And may I mention a couple of things before we go?
Absolutely.
I'm a huckster. My dad had a grocery store. I worked in it from age 6 to 21. I've got to do this. Okay. I'm also continuing to do book series. These are available print on demand on Amazon. This is an extension of Tyrant. The back of every Tyrant had a section called the Tyrant Media Guide. And I am continuing that work of chronicling dinosaur pop culture, comic books, movies, trading cards, and so on. And I've been doing this book series with my good friend, Tim Paxton, a zine creator, Tim Paxton, and author, Tim Paxton, and working with another graphic novelist, my friend, Mark Mastel. There's also a print-on-demand series of monster sketchbooks. So if you just want to see my artwork, we have put together a series of sketchbooks. The first one was Thoughtful Creatures, over 100 pages of monster drawings by me, followed by Brooding Creatures with a cover done with my good friend, John Jennings. And we just in December put out a third sketchbook called In the Mood for Monsters, and sort of warming up for the Tyrant Project. This includes an essay on why I love and draw monsters. These are all available on Amazon, print on demand, paperback, black and white, paperback color, or hardcover color. And working with my friend Tim Paxton, I've also got a book series called Cryptid Cinema. These are books dedicated to movies and TV shows about cryptids, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, and fictional cryptids like Creature from the Black Lagoon, King Kong, Godzilla, and so on. And we've got 2 more books in the series in the works right now. So I'm keeping busy, folks. Keep an eye out on what I'm doing via print on demand. My good friend Rick Veitch has been using print on demand to continue his graphic novel series. Right now he's doing True Man. And Rick is doing what I should be doing with dinosaur comics, but Rick is really doing it with his comics. There it is. My pitch.
Yeah. Hey, nothing wrong with that, because obviously Tyrant's going to bring a whole new fan base into your work. And honestly, if you have not dived in yet, you need to dive in. The link for Tyrant's Kickstarter is in the liner notes of this podcast episode and YouTube show. And on behalf of Rich and myself, thank you for checking out another edition of Fanlight Zone Presents. We'll see you next time.
It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know. 'Cause anyone who's worth a damn be worth way more than a picture could ever show. You could find the right light, find the right angle, and never find your soul. And it can feel like a losing battle, and this plot is full of holes. This modern way of finding love just makes me feel so alone. And I can't be the only one sick of staring at my phone. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Don't know that I believe in the old time fable. Everyone has just one true love. All I know is you're across this table, and you're all I'm thinking of. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Talk to me. Talk to me. It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know.